Among miscellaneous advertisements for diamonds, cotton and artificial teeth, readers of the Edinburgh Review in June 1827 could find information on how to visit London's latest engineering marvel. A little over 2 years after the first earth had been broken in the building of the Thames Tunnel, notice was hereby given that the public will be admitted to view the tunnel works every day, Sundays excepted, between the hours of 7 in the morning and 8 in the evening, on payment of £1 for each person. In April 1829, there was a similar advertisement in the London-based Athenaeum and Literary Chronicle. This notice located the tunnel's entrances near Rotherhithe Church on the south side of the river and opposite to Wapping Dock Stairs on the north. It further tells us that the cost of admission remained £1 and that the visiting hours have been slightly scaled back, now from 9 in the morning until 6 in the evening. What is more, this latter advertisement included a reassurance that the tunnel is lighted with gas, is dry and warm, and that the descent is by a safe and easy staircase. By way of conclusion, the text boasted that 74,500 persons have visited these works since they have been open to public inspection. We cannot be sure who sent these words to the press, but we do know that they were printed by order of Charles Butler, clerk to the company. One of the clerk's tasks was to deal with the public relations fallout from two major breaches of the works in 1827 and 1828. After the first instance of flooding, the chief engineer, Mark Isambard Brunel, was confident enough to host an underwater banquet as proof of the tunnel's structural integrity. The second inundation was more serious. 6 men lost their lives, and Brunel's son, Isambard, was dragged from the wreckage unconscious. When read in this context, the promise in the Athenaeum of a light, dry, warm, safe visit seems like an attempt to maintain the standing of the scheme in the face of public scrutiny. It was also, more plainly, an attempt to drum up custom and get some shillings in the kitty as the projected date of completion slid further into the future. Indeed, it would be 1834 before work began again in earnest, and a further 9 years until the tunnel was cut all the way through. Even then, in 1843, it was only open to pedestrian traffic. Brunel's vision of a gently sloping entranceway for carriages was abandoned when land amid the docks and warehouses of East London proved too costly to purchase on a grand scale. Throughout the construction period, as costs waxed and patience waned, the tunnel continued to feature in lists of London attractions. In 1833, for example, as the drilling apparatus stood idle, an advertisement, again by order of the clerk to the company, appeared alongside other public amusements in the Morning Chronicle. The company must have been convinced of the value of such advertising, since they continued to send copy to the Chronicle month after month. By 1835, when the major machinery was back in action, the notices offered more detail. The archway being lighted with oil gas and reflected by a large mirror at the extremity of the finished portion of the tunnel receives great light and has at the same time the effect of completion given to it. Then the familiar refrain, the work is dry and warm and the descent by the staircase easy and safe. Another London newspaper, The Standard, ran similar advertisements with additional information on transport connections. There are conveyances to and from the tunnel by omnibus every hour from Gracechurch Street and 3 daily from Charing Cross, and also by the Greenwich and Woolwich steamboats from Hungerford Market, Queen Hithe, Fresh Wharf at 9, 11, 2 and 4 o'clock. If the publicity from the late 1820s appeared anxious to reassure the public about the viability of the scheme, not least because the only previous attempt to cut a tunnel under the Thames had literally sunk in quicksand, the listings from the mid-1830s suggest a different story. Here, the gaslighting, the large mirror, the travel options all evoke a leisure venue more than a building site. Even accounting for the vagaries of Victorian miscellany, it is striking how, by the turn of the next decade, the Thames Tunnel appeared side by side with the Haymarket, the Adelphi, and the English Opera House, as well as a range of panoramas and public lectures in the pages of the Examiner newspaper. Similarly, in The Age, the tunnel shared page space with a whole host of London shows. In 1842, shortly before the completion of the stairways on either bank, readers of the Examiner were informed that books with plate descriptions of the works are sold at the tunnel, price £1. Just as visitors to the theatre might purchase a playbook or libretto, so visitors to the tunnel could now leave with their own bibliographic memento. By the following year, when the world's journalists descended from Rotherhithe to pen their pieces about the ceremonial opening, This underwater walkway was already established as a tourist destination. What had begun as a means of saving face during an anxious phase of the project went on to become a central justification for a crossing with precious little practical value. For a conservative publication such as Chambers' Journal, the tunnel nevertheless deserved to be praised, in part because it was so strongly backed by the Duke of Wellington. The fact that the drilling machinery was known as the Shield further helped to imbue this civil endeavour with a sense of national military pride. The tunnel, according to Chambers, was calculated to create a deep and abiding sense of the persevering energy and affluence of England. It is, we understand, the site by which, above all others, foreigners are impressed when they visit London, and the one most often spoken of on the continent. What is remarkable about this claim, written in 1844, is that it comes immediately after a description of what is, in effect, an elaborate penny arcade. All along, in the intervals between the central row of pillars, I'm quoting here, are placed stalls of toys, confectionaries, music sheets, etc., together with a printing press from which you can purchase, wet at a penny, a broadside containing an account of the tunnel printed by authority 76 feet below high water mark. If we turn to the 1844 edition of Mogg's New Picture of London, we find a visitor's guide that cannot hide a nagging sense of disappointment. Where the writer in Chambers' Journal saw an expression of energy and affluence, the author of Mogg's found the tunnel merely novel and curious. The root of the problem was the absence of wheeled transport. The intention of the engineer, we read, was the formation of a passage for carriages and pedestrians under the Thames, and the tunnel will, when finished, be one of the most extraordinary and stupendous works of ancient or modern times. For now, however, this vast work excites the admiration of the visitors and, regarded as an exhibition, is perhaps the most interesting of which the metropolis can boast. A few years later, an article in Reynolds' Miscellany went further than reducing the tunnel to an exhibition, referring to the structure as a large bricked tube. This article, in the wit and humour section of the paper, continued by noting how the purpose for which the tunnel was constructed has never been clearly ascertained. The writer goes on to report that some highly scientific individuals have conceived that during a severe winter it is intended to be filled with boiling water and so ensure the uninterrupted navigation of the river by preventing an accumulation of ice. Others have imagined that it is to be converted into a powder magazine and, in case of invasion, to be used to set the Thames on fire or blow up the enemy's fleet. Clearly, the failure of the tunnel to live up to its stated aims made it an easy target for mockery. But the fanciful functions listed in Reynolds are less revealing, I think, than the commercial uses mentioned above. Take another report from the Friends Intelligencer in 1857. The tunnel at present is both a success and a failure. As an example of engineering skill, it is undoubtedly a great triumph. But until it can be used for vehicles as well as foot passengers, it will not answer its original purpose. Instead, we read, it is opened day and night for passengers at a toll of 1 penny each. It is lighted with gas, and some of its arches are occupied as small shops and for the exhibition of works of art. Where infrastructure is too slow for public expectations, street traders and artisans were quick to exploit a new market. What was initially billed as a bold feat of transport engineering, one dreamed up amid the construction frenzy post-Waterloo, had slowly morphed into a site of mass exhibition and cheap entertainment. This process, we might speculate, was typical of the workings of capital in mid-19th century London. As much as the metropolis was a hive of industry, it was also a thriving centre of display. The daily performance of modernity was naturally accompanied and to an extent accomplished by music. We've already heard from Chambers about the sheets and broadsides for sale 76 feet below high water mark. There were also plentiful reports of bands being called upon to play at either entrance to the tunnel. For the opening in 1843, the musicians of the Scotch Fusilier Guards were employed. In 1845, the Age and Argus advertised a fancy fair underwater, complete with 2 bands of music, the Swiss band in their native costume on the Middlesex side of the tunnel, and the Welsh band on the Surrey shore. There was also much evidence for music that could be heard upon entering the tunnel. An account by the American tourist William Allen Drew from the year of the Great Exhibition tells of his descent from Wapping via a brass turnstile and a set of marble steps. The walls of the shaft circular, Drew writes, finished in stucco and hung with paintings and other curious objects. You halt a few moments on the first platform and listen to the notes of a huge organ that occupies a part of it, discoursing excellent music. The description continues down to the base of the rotunda. There are alcoves near the wall, Drew writes, in which are all sorts of contrivances to get your money, from Egyptian necromancers and fortune tellers to dancing monkeys. The room is lighted with gas and is brilliant. Judging by a slightly later account by Drew's countryman W.O. Daniel, the monkeys were the property of organ grinders, who presumably had to carry their instruments up and down the steps every day. As O'Daniel writes in his Ins and Outs of London of 1859, the echo is very great, and music, of which there is at all times great abundance in the tunnel, as the strange echo along the arches and up the shafts sounds particularly fine, though seldom proceeding from anything but hand organs or wandering street musicians. Another tourist text, this time from the German writer Max Schlesinger, corroborates the presence of music at each entrance. To quote from Otto Wegstern's English translation, first published in 1853, "As we descend, stray bits and snatches of music greet our ears. As we proceed, the music becomes more clear and distinct, and here it is. A miniature exhibition of English industrial skill. It is an Italian organ played by a perfect doll of a Lilliputian steam engine." In addition to this description of a bespoke industrial instrument, we get a rare impression of the repertoire programmed for visitors to the tunnel. That engine, Schlesinger continues, grinds the organ from morning till night. It gives us various pieces without any compunction or political scruples. The Marseillaise, German waltzes, the Hungarian Rakowski March, Rule Britannia, the Yankee Doodle, etc. As Schlesinger quips, "Those London organs are the most tolerant of musical instruments that I know of. They appeal to all nations and purses." Given that he was in London for the Great Exhibition, it seems that Schlesinger, like the writer in Chambers' journal, was using the tunnel to take the pulse of the nation. What he found was not a genius for engineering so much as a disposition to petty commerce. But not every report was so sure-footed in its findings. As I was sauntering along the tunnel, wrote the American J.T. Headley in 1853, suddenly I heard a low humming sound which startled me prodigiously. I looked anxiously around, but finding no one the least alarmed, I concluded it was all right and walked on. But that strange humming grew louder and louder and completely bewildered me. Headley's vocabulary gives a hint of what is to come, but only a hint. The humming had no rising swell or sinking cadence, he writes, but monotonous, deep and constant, kept rising every moment louder and clearer. Hastening forward, I came to the farther entrance of the tunnel, and there sat a man and a boy, one with a violin and the other with a harp, innocent authors of all the strange, indescribable sounds that had so confused me. It's worth quoting the rest of the passage, if only to underline that the discovery of the musicians provides scant resolution to this account. Endless reverberations amid those long arches, so completely mingled there together, one overtaking and blending in with another, and the whole bounding back in a mass to be again split asunder and tossed about, created such a jargon as I never before listened to. The sounds could not escape, and in their struggle to do so, hitting along the roof and sides of the tunnel, they at length lost all distinctness of utterance and became tangled up in the most astonishing manner. Apologies for the long quotation, but I wanted to give you a full sense there. These were by no means the first comments on the acoustics of the tunnel. The Morning Post's piece on the opening procession mentioned the Scots Fusilier Guards who played God Save the Queen with Rule Britannia, the music producing a beautiful effect as it reverberated through the arches. Likewise, upon the visit of Victoria and Albert to the tunnel in 1843, the Bury and Norwich Post reported that the reverberation of the voices singing God Save the Queen had a most extraordinary effect. But the absence of a celebratory context for Headley's observations make them more perplexing. Here, music is not an index of confidence, either in the achievements of the nation or the trade among nations, but rather it is a source of profound confusion. If one aspect of this story is the apparent ability of street trade, including street musicians to occupy any available space in Victorian London. Another aspect of the tunnel's history is a palpable uncertainty with regard to the social and financial functions of new urban spaces. Music under the Thames was both familiar and strange. It was a measure of wonder and of failure. But in the moment of audition, it was first and foremost something to approach or leave behind. It was an experience of and in transit. For those like Schlesinger, who stayed too long or sauntered too slowly, the risk was something like sonic suffocation. But fear not, the musicians would soon be gone for good, leaving only locomotion in their wake. As Charles Dickens Jr. explains in his Dictionary of the Thames of 1881, the pence of the sightseers and the rent of the stalls proved wholly insufficient, and in 1865 the tunnel company were glad to get rid of their white elephant at a loss of about half its original cost. It now belongs to the East London Railway Company. Nearest steamboat pier, tunnel. Railway stations, Wapping and Rotherhithe. Omnibus routes, Blackwell and Rotherhithe.